Welcome to Meet the Ocean. I'm your host, Paul North, and today you get to go behind the scenes of how we make our podcasts. So often, we talk of this and that creature on our episodes without giving enough credit to those who make the sounds, and in doing so, create the experiences. Getting to know the passion and talent that goes into every episode will hopefully make you understand and appreciate the whole of Meet the Ocean's efforts to continue to inform the next generation of ocean advocates. Our film Winter in Antarctica is being viewed across the world, and our Penguin Pen Pal program is alive and well with written correspondences traveling across the world even as we speak. All of these efforts are a creative way to remind us that our planet is worth protecting. And the more we know about it, the better we can do so. You can always find more podcasts, underwater creatures, and ways to donate to our nonprofit on our website, meettheocean.org. And now, let's introduce you to our team.
Hello there. I'm Andy Gettings. I'm a co-producer for Meet the Ocean. I do a lot of the editing and nitty-gritty dialogue cleanup and get in on some creative decisions as well, some effects and music placement, and I work with Kelsey's Effects to get a final mix of each episode.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Anderson. You've probably heard my voice at the end of some episodes. I did my own episode with Splash in Galapagos about my time there. I make and design sound effects for the podcast. So everything that you hear from animals to waves to wind, I'm either making in my apartment or I'm finding online with special people that do it in the field. So it's really fun.
Yeah, I've been trying to think of an analogy to describe this process because, you know, if you're in a kitchen in a restaurant, then you have the chef and the sous chef and, you know, the baker, and it all turns into a meal. And I think in our kitchen, the roles change from time to time, but I am always the one handing you guys sort of half-baked ideas, and you definitely put them in the oven in the most beautiful of ways. So thank you for that.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, maybe I preheat the oven, Kelsey bakes, and then we all take it out when the timer goes.
Wait, does that imply that we've overcooked a podcast here and there? You know, I will admit that sometimes I feel the descriptor podcast is not even enough. You know, we're creating these audio experiences, sound libraries, and now a library of episodes. I think just recently, maybe you guys can tell me, we just crossed 80? So back to that idea of the term podcast not being enough. Instead of talking about us as a podcast team, I've come up with some new phrases, and I just want to check in with you guys to get like a yay or a nay. I'll need a vote from both of you. So instead of the podcast team, what about sound wizards?
I can get behind that.
I need a pointy hat for that, though, and like a magic wand at least.
The internet exists. We can get those things. All right. What about ocean gospel?
And that makes you the sea preacher, right?
People don't understand how much I wave my hands around when I'm on the microphone. You know, everyone asks, why aren't you a video podcast? But my question is, do you really want to see me recording in my closet?
Yes.
I kind of just picture you at a podium or on a pulpit. Is that the right word?
The pulpit, yeah. With like a thick Bible full of ocean taxonomy, just all the science in one place. What about people who really care and give a whole bunch of their time and creative energy to create something meaningful for the world? Can that fit on a jersey?
We'd have to put it in a, what do you call that? An anagram, right? So it'd be like PWC. I don't even remember the rest of it.
I'm open to all options, clearly. So if you guys have any offerings, even if it comes up in the middle of this discussion, shout it out. Because yes, we are a podcast. Yes, we've created 80 plus of them. But really what we're trying to do is just sort of make a beautiful sound that the world wants to listen to, blending education with entertainment. And I feel empowered by having you guys on team. So thanks so much for being part of this journey. We have some programs going on, and I think they're kind of interesting specifically because no one's really traveling right now. And, often destinations in mind are like Hawaii or Mexico or maybe somewhere in Europe. But you also have to keep in mind that a place like Antarctica, a place that's so far away, is also not being traveled to by tourists. Scientists, yes, in a diminished capacity, but largely the world isn't getting to see Antarctica in the way it normally does this year. So we have created some programs, and I think you both, Kelsey and Andy, have received some flightless birds in the mail recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found some penguins in my mail. What about you, Andy?
I did. Yes, I was a recipient of the Penguin Pen Pal program.
What is a penguin pen pal? I feel that needs some explanation.
So you can, as a human, as a child, as a grandparent, whatever, you can actually write to a penguin. It's super cool. So they'll actually write back to you. We've already had some submissions. I think some little guy called himself Charlie Brown and named the penguin. What was it again, Paul?
The penguin was named Ninja Warrior.
Right. So you can also name your own penguin. And what else do you receive? Some a card game that looked incredible. I haven't played it yet. Paul, could you tell me a little bit more about how that card game's played?
Yeah, I mean, as with all things, we're just trying to get people to think less of the rock stars in the ocean, because we all know the whales and the dolphins, but the card game is set up to think about the ecosystem, to think about all the small parts added together that make Antarctica, the Southern Ocean, what it is. And that's true for every ecosystem, but specifically with that one, it's so far away and so strange to us and so cold that it's cool to sort of have it tangibly in your hands in a way that you can play with and interact.
With the VR, I remember turning around. There was one scene where there's a penguin and he's right in your face. And I remember I audibly screamed, even though the penguin's not there. It didn't scare me, it just surprised me that he was so close. That's such a neat experience.
I mean, it's 2021. We have to get creative around here, people. So the other portal, I like the word portal. It makes it sound sci-fi and fun and something you actually want to investigate. So our other portal to Antarctica is a film, and it's a word that I've been using. The word is impossible. Is it an impossible film? Well, what does that mean? I don't know. There was this pandemic going on and no one was going to Antarctica and all the theaters got shut. So things like Cirque du Soleil got canceled. And all of a sudden we had an opportunity to use the talent of the Las Vegas circus performance community for Antarctic conservation. It is called Winter in Antarctica. It's available now, but our podcast team, Kelsey and Andy, you were a part of it. So Kelsey, let's start with you because your work was largely already done. You had, back to the kitchen analogy, you had baked the pies already. We were just adding them to the film. So at what point did you check into the project and sort of realize what was happening?
I've actually been to a couple of Cirque du Soleil shows. I've been to O and I've been to Love, the Beatles one. So I knew what kind of stuff these people were capable of. And to hear that we were involved with it, it just blew my mind, just how we could combine podcasting and sounds and just kind of the education that we already have with their stellar moves and acrobatics and dancing and artistry and costume design. So I remember Andy texted me and said, "Hey, I'm using your sound effects in there," for stuff that he was already doing. And it was really neat because Andy might be able to shed some more light on this, but he was able to use sounds that I had already made or already kind of compiled into a soundscape into the project itself. So it was really neat to see how that kind of came to fruition.
I will admit the most intense collaboration of my life. December was a very interesting month, but the results is so worth it. And, sometimes when I come up with these ideas, I have to sort of arrange the words in my head of how am I going to approach the throne of Sound Lord Andy Gettings and let him know how deeply I need his help. Because not only were you a musician on the project, Andy, and shout out to Jordan Kolar, our other musician on the project, but you were the one stitching it all together. So many people entered and exited this process at various points during the film, but you were there from beginning to end, literally, even just making the trailer with me the other day. So I don't know which of the 16 questions I want to ask you, but just tell me about the experience of digging into a project like this.
Yeah, well, thanks for the flattery with the throne terminology, but I fear that might just be a folding campfire chair. I'm comfortable in that type of seating. But yeah, so early on when I kind of realized the full scope of the project and what it was going to turn into and what it was going to require to get done as far as sound effects and soundscape goes, I kind of just realized that we already had everything that we needed in all of the amazing work that Kelsey had done thus far. And we already have so many episodes dealing with Antarctica and penguins and stuff like that, that really just out of practicality, I just one night made a note of all our episodes that touched on those subjects, went back through and pulled out the best sound effects and sound beds, and more focused on getting those to be sonically the best that they could be, rather than us having the whole wrinkle of having to make 40 minutes of new soundscape, which, Kelsey and I are both capable of doing, but in the time frame, it would be a huge, huge ask. It was around the holidays, everyone's busy, so on the sound effects and soundscape side, that's kind of how all that came together. Met Jordan through an email. Paul, you facilitated that connection, and he sent along some tunes that were really, really impressive, and he's got his own, definitely a really unique sound that's his own. And I believe at least a few of the tracks that he provided, I think he made specifically for this project, which is doubly impressive in the time frame we were working with. So I contributed some of my own music to that as well. I kind of just sent along a handful of songs that I had made over the years for Jordan and the performers to consider, and the contortionists and the aerial acrobat chose a couple of my tunes, one of which was a collaboration with my good friend Keith Constable. It was pretty amazing to see the performances to Jordan's music and some of my own music. It kind of brought it to life in a way that I've never experienced or expected it would be. And then, yeah, getting down to the end of it, after Ashley Caritas did her video edit, then we finally had a timeline that I could work with to stitch it all together and choose where sound effects would land to complement the visuals, both the B-roll and the performance. And I just kind of wove all the music and FX together. Honestly, it's all kind of a blur, and when I watch it back, I'm like, man, who did that? So it was very fun to be part of.
Man, I can echo that sentiment. It was a blur, and when I watch it, I think it needs to be recognized that there's something unique about a podcast team approaching a film, because you two specifically are so exact with filling the void, the sound void that is, and knowing when silence is powerful and when the whisper of the wind or the slight crackle of the ice can prove useful and almost give a breath. Because those performances were intense. And to experience them is intense. And you guys chose a way to provide sort of a chapter transition in between them. And of course, the visuals helped, but I felt so trusting of the sound bed because it allowed me to breathe. It wasn't just shock and awe the whole time. It was that sort of sine wave that carries you through. So well done. I think for context, I should say that in January of 2020, I reached out to our executive producer, Rara Plasoy, who was working with MGM Resorts at the time previous to COVID. And I said, hey, I got this idea. Like, let's bring Antarctica to Vegas, penguins in the desert, maybe winter in Antarctica. And she said, great idea. And then she laughed at me because that's the busiest time in Las Vegas because you have all the things. You have the holidays, you have the New Year. And then after the New Year, you have the Chinese New Year. So COVID actually made this possible. And I think that's why I was so heavy on the pedal to make it happen, because no one's going to Antarctica this year. So it provides us a pretty unique opportunity. So thank you. Thank you for stepping up to the plate. Thank you for allowing my theater brain to mix with my polar diving. I think essentially here, and Kelsey, I know you can back me up on this one, but don't ever underestimate a degree in the liberal arts, kids.
Yes.
All right, so the topic of the day, because as we were doing all this, as we were creating films that focused on conservation in a very faraway place, as we were reaching out to children's hospitals and delivering penguins to kids across the country, something happened to our podcast. It's a good thing, so don't worry. We crossed a certain threshold. Now, Andy, can you remind me, there's some sort of statistic about how beginning podcasts never make it past a certain episode?
Yeah, I think we talked about this early on in this crazy journey, probably 3-4 years ago now. You had told me that someone was talking to you about our project and said that most podcasts don't make it past 13 episodes or something like that, maybe 14. And, I imagine the reason is you can kind of get a lot of enthusiasm about projects when you're first starting them up, and it's hard to carry through on a lot of stuff and things like that. But I remember you told me that, and I kind of took it as a challenge that we were definitely going to make it past that far.
Well, the thing that happened is we crossed 75,000 downloads. And, in these days when you're talking about likes, 75,000 might not actually sound like a lot, but this isn't a like. This isn't a thumbs up. This is 75,000 times people checked in to, what'd you call it? The audio theater club, Andy?
Yes.
That is Meet the Ocean. Even when we kind of went dormant in December and focused on the film, we're still getting almost 200 downloads a day. And we're all here on this conversation right now. This is us. There are other creatives who we work with, but this is the heart and soul. I'm very proud to say that not only we've kept the fire burning, and we have all that we need to continue this journey of educating the world in the way that we do, leading with storytelling. So I just wanted to say congratulations to the team, but now it's time for math. You guys ready for some math?
Oh,
I'm ready.
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right, 2019. Total downloads for Meet the Ocean. We don't talk about this a lot. For the audience, this isn't a setup. This is a true reveal. Don't fall out of your chair, kids. Total downloads, 19,808. That's for 2,000.
Total downloads?
Yep, almost 20,000 in the year 2019. And then 2020 happened. And you remember right around March when someone hit the off switch and everyone had to stay in their house and were looking for things to do? I just want you to have a guess at what percentage of increase did 2020 give to our podcast? By what percent did our podcast downloads increase? I want to hear a number from both of you.
65%.
65, she says. Andy, what do you got?
Yeah, my first gut response thinking about the numbers you mentioned is 50%.
You're all so humble. Well, the exact number is 94.27%.
What?
So we almost doubled our downloads in 2020. And again, for everyone listening, we are a very small nonprofit. We do not have a budget. We do not have a marketing anything. This is a purity of effort. And I think this is why the world responds. So, hey guys, well done on doubling up.
Appreciate it.
Nice. I'm giving you all a virtual high five.
I can feel it. It took a second to get to the West Coast, but I can feel it. All right, well, to sort of celebrate this, I did ask the team to sort of come up with questions. Questions that we can ask to each other. They could be rando, they could be about our process, but I just wanted to give us a chance to be silly and just dig in a little bit about who the people are who make this stuff. So, Kelsey, do you maybe want to kick us off?
Sure. I might be throwing Andy for a loop here, but I'm going to try to pose this the best I can. Do you have an analogy that you can come up with between what I would assume are your two favorite things? So hockey and audio. Do you have an analogy that ties both of them together?
Oh, man. An analogy that ties hockey and audio together. Well, definitely just perseverance, I guess, and having your sights set on an end goal. Hockey is the thing that I've done for the longest time in my life. I've played since I was 4 years old, and audio, let's see, I started making music when I was 19 and got really into the production side of things when I was 25 or so, and I just turned 38, and I can truly say that I've had very little confidence in my audio skills. I mean, everyone's their own worst critic, right? I still struggle with some of that stuff, but it took a lot of stick-to-itiveness to be comfortable with my skills and where I fit in best in audio production, whether it be the nuts and bolts, dialogue cleanup, mixing stuff that I definitely enjoy doing, or applying myself more creatively. It took a while to get there, and it's definitely something that I think I learned from playing hockey, where there's a lot of adversity, and it's a hard road to be effective in what you're trying to do. So I don't know if that's really an analogy, but that was the first thing that came to mind when connecting the two.
That was a pretty heavy-handed first question. I'm a little scared of what you're going to ask me, Kelsey. Annie, it is only fair. You're next for whomever you choose.
Okay, yep. Let's see. For Paul, I want to know who dubbed you the Sea Preacher? Where did this nickname come from? Did you dub yourself like a knight with a sword on each shoulder, or where did that come from?
I think it would have no honor if I gave that title to myself. I am a polar expedition diver. I work with Lindblad Expeditions and National Geographic, and very often I find myself on the microphone. So I'll do a dive, I'll film it, I'll edit it, I'll get super excited to present it. So this all happens on a very short timeline. So I have to not only sort of be the kind of person who can crank out media that quickly, but also have the head full of knowledge, because you don't really have time to look it up when you're on that kind of a schedule. And you're trying to weave together like a 10-minute story in the same day. So there's a chaos to it. There's an energy to it. And something that happens that I'm not physically aware of. Someone hands me the microphone. I hold it like a normal speaker does, with the black tail down in hand and the microphone properly in front of the mouth. But then as I start to go on and on, the base of the microphone lifts up, and all of a sudden it's like horizontal with my mouth. And then as I get more and more excited, and as the creatures get better and better on screen, now it tilts upwards at like a diagonal, and eventually the microphone's like upside down, like I'm in a Beastie Boys video. And my fellow colleagues, I think specifically Mike G, it was either him or it was Eric Wehrmeister that gave me the title Sea Preacher. But I definitely know it was Mike G who first commented on my microphone tilting when I get excited. There you go. Was that a satisfactory answer?
Yeah, that was great. I'd never heard that story, believe it or not. I did assume that it was someone else that gave you the title, and I just now realized it sounds like Sea Creature. I can't believe I've never connected that before.
Well, I'm 50-50, All right, well, I got questions. I have so many questions. Kelsey, I just finished a cup of tea. On my mug, it's my favorite mug. There's a penguin, there's a beluga, there's a walrus, there's a pteropod, so some plankton, there's a narwhal, there's an undescribed baleen whale. Basically the same variety pack that our podcast offers to the world. And you never know what's coming your way. I might be like, all right, today it's a harp seal and tomorrow it's a snapping shrimp. Or, not only do you have to find those creatures, you also have to creatively incorporate them. So I want to hear what happens with your process. How do you create these sound visions when I say go, when I sort of assign the creature? Describe that to our fair audience.
Sure. So a lot of times I'll get the episode and it'll be, upon first listen, it's always oh my gosh, do I have that sound already? I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. I have quite the amount of folders on my external hard drive of penguins, of whales, of things like that. But every once in a while, Paul throws me something that doesn't have a sound because it's underwater. It's not near a microphone. Nobody's recorded it before, et cetera, et cetera. So I use a lot of internet savvy. I've become very good with the old Google machine to try to kind of deduce how I would break that down as a sound designer. So I think one of the ones that was thrown at me was a crab. And yes, you do have, the snapping of the claws and things like that, but what does it sound like when it's underwater? What does seagrass sound like when it's swaying underwater? I can kind of, through Google, find out what seagrass is made out of. I can find out how the water kind of gets it to sway to and fro, but what does that sound like to you as the listener when you're listening to it? How does it come alive through a musical chime, maybe kind of reminding you of wind passing through? Or is it more of a wave? And I kind of play with it a little bit. A lot of times I'll have a lot of options, and I'm sure Andy sometimes pulls his hair out for this, but I'll put kind of the options and layer them on top of each other. Because a lot of times it isn't just one sound, it's a whole cacophony of them to make that come alive. So it's a lot of trial and error. But it's also a lot of research, because I want to make sure that when Paul is talking about a specific penguin over a specific albatross, that I'm actually grabbing the sound of a black-footed albatross or a gentoo penguin, and not just a random penguin or a king penguin that you're used to hearing in cartoons.
And I think that provides an immense amount of scientific validity. Most of that's going to be unconscious, but for anyone, and we have many scientists on our podcast, we have many educators listening to our podcast. So that nuance, that extra effort that you put in, I think that makes all the difference.
I appreciate that. But it's kind of fun too.
Yeah, it's a weird, wild world out there. Kelsey, next question.
Ooh. So, Paul, what is the part of interviewing that you've had to work on or that makes you nervous? Is it like pressing the record button, or is it just getting comfortable with the cool person across from you?
That's a great question. A lot of these people are experts in super fascinating things. We've had conservation author Carl Safina and scientific illustrator David Sibley, these legends on our podcast, and they've been interviewed so many times. And I have run into the folk, not those who I just mentioned, but there are some people that are like, when I'm talking about myself, this is how I talk. And it comes off as a little too prepackaged, doesn't have sincerity. So when you're working with, let's call them the more famous people, you have to sort of duck and weave a little bit and give them the permission to be themselves and make sure that it's a safe space. So I think the hardest part for me, or the most butterfly in the stomach for me, is the first 5 minutes, because it's there that you establish the tone, you establish the trust. Because even before we hit record on this, we sort of had a reminder to just be ourselves and to be silly and to be honest. Whereas most people, or many people, I should say, are thinking, oh my goodness, the world's going to hear this. I need to make sure that everything I say is accurate and 100% true, which they do. But that doesn't have to be a nervous thing. You just have to trust that you've been working in the field for 15 years. And just, if you do garble up a penguin's name when you're saying the scientific, Pygoscelis papua, come on, Gentoo penguin, kids, right there. But you might not get it right every time, and that's okay. So I try and create like I said, a safe space and let the conversation unfold from there. Success rates, I'd say about 80%. Some people just can't get comfortable when a microphone's in proximity, and that's okay. That's when I rely on our sound effects editor to do all the heavy lifting. Andy, question.
Yeah, so Kelsey, you've told me in the past, or maybe I found out through one of your Instagram stories, but your favorite sea creature is a manta ray. Is that right?
That is correct.
Do you have hopes that we'll do a Meet the Ocean feature on rays someday? And I guess this is a two-part question. How did the ray become your favorite sea creature?
So the first part of that question, do I hope we talk about it? Absolutely. I open every file being like, oh, is this the one? Is this the one? It never is. But the other part of that is when I do open that file and hear the wonderful person or people or organization talking about rays, I'm probably going to pee my pants a little bit because the the sound effects that I'll have to come up for that is going to be crazy, just because they don't make noise.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
They don't have a call. They don't have a cry. They don't have anything like that. So I'm going to have to come up with it. And it's probably going to be the best week of my life and the most taxing, because I'm probably going to have everybody in my life listen to it probably multiple times and go, does this sound right? Does this sound right? And they'll go, I don't know. It sounds cool. Good job. I can't wait till that day. Paul, make that day happen. And then the other part of it was how did they become my favorite animal? I think when I was little, everybody had animals that were in zoos. So it was like, I like tigers, I like bears, I like giraffes. And though those animals were very pretty to me, I liked the idea of an animal that had, to my knowledge, I don't think manta rays have many predators. I think it's just sharks, maybe. But I just loved an animal that could take care of itself. And the more that I learned about it, and the more I learned about how sometimes they travel the ocean on their own, the way that they flap their wings, quote unquote. I mean, it's just such a beautiful animal. And I think I just fell in love with it. And I also I would tell people, what's your favorite animal? And I would answer, a ray. And they would go, don't you know those things can kill you? It was kind of a fun answer of well, yeah, but I like that they can take care of themselves.
Well, Kelsey, now that I know, we'll make that happen. Do you want to interview the manta ray scientist?
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. That would bring me back to my interviewing days. Sure.
Consider it done. All right, Andy. The not final question, because you know how I roll. This one's a little abstract, but there's something powerful about coming up with an idea that you know will only exist if the sound is right. And when I say if the sound is right, I mean, does it provide transitional thought? Does it bring home the point? Does it deliver the emotion in the way that the subject matter demands? And that's always what I want. And that's always what I hand to you with some sort of instruction. But you always do so well to bring that to life. So what I want to ask is, from your point of view, what is the power of sound?
Whoa.
What is the power of sound? Yeah, so I think hearing is a pretty unique sense in that it's 360 degrees, whereas vision is in front of you. So I think the nature of sound itself is pretty all-encompassing, is, I guess, a pretty abstract way to describe it. But, a lot of times you don't notice it unless it's not there. So I feel like there's a lot of subliminal qualities to it. And I remember hearing audio professionals describe a good sound mix or a good job mixing a live performance. They're like, you just want people to not notice it. And not in the sense that they don't notice the content of the audio or the music, but they don't notice any problems that take them out of the narrative or out of the creative environment that you're meant to be put in. So I really like the subliminal aspect of it, where your job is to make it seem like you didn't have anything to do, when in fact there was quite a bit to be done, but it was all for the purpose of making it seem natural. And yeah, I don't know, the power of sound. I remember in high school, I think it was in English class, but my teacher posed the question, what is the sense that is most connected to emotion? And I think technically the correct answer, or the answer that most scientists would give, is smell. And I can definitely see that. The olfactory sense is incredibly instinctual. I think probably closest to your brain physically, but my first answer was sound, because I just grown up with music and stuff, and I love when audio or music connects in a way that you kind of get chills and your hair stands up, and the power of sound, I guess, is beauty.
Andy, I agree with you. I think you're speaking to harmony, right? If a sound creation isn't in line with the rest of what someone is hearing, then their brain asks a question that takes them out of the sort of hypnotic creative that you're trying to keep them in.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, we're really getting into the sound weeds now. Hey, just so you know, we're about to cut to a Penguin Pen Pal commercial that we haven't made yet. So I'm going to need 2 adjectives from you guys. Kelsey?
Effervescent.
Oh, man, you're going to make it really hard on me. Okay. Andy?
Oh, man. Scrumptious.
Ooh, okay. Well, there's technically nothing consumable in our Pen Pal program, but I'll work that in there anyways. All right, and go.
Penguins don't drink soda, but they do make bubbles. Thousands and thousands of bubbles trapped between their feathers, effervescent as they rise to the surface. This might seem like fashion, but it's actually function. In order not to become a scrumptious meal for a large seal or killer whale, penguins use these bubbles to camouflage themselves. Who's got the bird brain now?
So to finish up our episode, I just want to ask you guys, why do you do it? Why do you continue with this project? Because it is an uphill climb. We are fighting for the planet, for awareness, for understanding, and participation. And we're doing that through a variety of lenses, the main one being audio. So if you could boil that down into 2 words of why do you do it, lay that on me.
Purpose and fun.
Kelsey?
I would say preservation and imagination.
I think I just understand that because of the uniqueness between the 3 people on this conversation, no one can do it like we can. I thank you for being here. I thank you for being who you are, because Meet the Ocean wouldn't be what it is without you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was super fun to get on this side of the mic.
Meet the Ocean is produced by Paul North and Andrew Gettings, with sound design by Kelsey Anderson. You can discover the many educational programs we offer, more podcasts, films, and ways to donate on our nonprofit's website, meettheocean.org.
Um,